attended every one.
That's so nice. And Eileen, I don't know if you've ever subtracted out to see what number the first one. I've never looked at my first number. We'll go there someday, but right now we'll remind Gail of 362 plus all the agenda setting ones. So we'll call to order with a roll call. Commissioner Cameron.
Good morning. I am here.
Commissioner O'Brien.
I am here.
Commissioner Hill.
Present.
We're all set then. And as I said, public meeting number 362. We don't have minutes this morning, but we will start with the administrative update. Again, good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. To start off, we're going to do the on-site casino updates, and we have Assistant Director Bruce Band ready to tell you what's going on at the casinos.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. It's kind of a light update. I will start with MGM. Last Friday, they had their holiday tree lighting and their official opening of their ice rink. In attendance were Santa, the Patriots hat, and the Patriots cheerleaders. They also announced that on 12/13, MGM will fully open their hotel, and this will include all floors, and they will be open 24/7 on the hotel. Encore is slated to open up the new VIP lounge 23, but as of right now, it will be without slots, as the manufacturer has been unable to deliver them because of supply shortage at this time. They will put the slots in that area as soon as they are able to receive. Nothing new to report from Plain Ridge Park, and that is the short version of the report. If you have any questions, please ask.
Commissioners, any questions for Bruce this morning? Commissioner Hill, you're all set, I see. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next item on the administrative update is the hybrid work model and office reopening update. As you're aware, we implemented a pilot program through the end of the year for this hybrid remote working option for staff. My recommendation is that the Commission address what it wants to do on a sort of an ongoing basis, starting in January at the next meeting on the 16th. You know, just recognizing staff would be helpful to get some certainty. And if on the 16th, that would give us some time before the start of the new year. It would also be helpful at that time for the Commission to discuss as a body how it wants to conduct public meetings going forward. I wanted to give you an update on stream equipment. Staff did solicit bids for purchasing that equipment since the old equipment was no longer functional. Those bidders did come in and meet with team members on site at the MGC offices to get a look at the layout of the public meeting room and see what the needs were for the Commission and what the equipment is. We've already received 2 of the bids. We may get another one as well. And the plan is to meet next week to review the bids so that we can order equipment. We did ask the bidders to give us information, give us a response, which included a setup which allowed for our former setup in the room with the horseshoe table and the cameras and getting a view of all the commissioners, but also allow for a monitor so that the Commission could view any potential remote participants. What we're trying to get for the setup is that it would feel like you've done before with the in-person Commission meeting, but allow, for example, if MGM didn't want to, have to travel for the entire day for a 15-20-minute presentation, there would be the option to remote participation, but to limit the screen time for commissioners who want to engage with each other and have a robust meeting. So that's where we are on that. The estimation that the bidders gave to staff members that once ordered, it could be, I think it was either 6 to 12 or 6 to 10 weeks for the equipment, but given supply chain issues, our team is cautious that nothing is guaranteed. So we can further test options for a hybrid meeting setup if we want to do that with camera equipment that we have or some other things that we have purchased. We can continue to do that, and we can The commission can determine if it wants to do interim hybrid meetings until the commission gets this live stream permanent equipment set up. So I think what the ask is, so from my end, from the staff end, is, please let us know what you'd like to do for testing. We're available. We have another setup downstairs to use the OWL if we wanted to do a hybrid meeting. It can work. It's not as good as the equipment we'd be purchasing, but it is an option, and it would allow for in-person interaction among the commissioners. But I'll leave it to the commission to determine how they want to run their meeting with just presenting that as an option. The expectation on the staff level is that MGC participants, so our team members here, those that are participating in the meeting would be on site, so that would be in person at the meeting. And the other issue I just want to make sure to flag for the commission is the duration of the time that our meetings would only be accessible virtually to the public. You may want to consider when you're discussing what you want to do for the meeting setup, whether or not the public is going to be allowed in the building and participate. So just wanted to flag that for you when you make your decision. So that's sort of where we are with the equipment.
Could we just pause there on the equipment? Commissioners, do you have questions for Karen on that?
Madam Chair, I was, and Commissioner O'Brien as well, we had an in-depth conversation about this at a working group meeting, so I know I'm fully updated on the equipment options and what makes sense. So I don't have questions.
What did you hear that Karen didn't just say?
Well, they haven't had a chance to really review bids till next week, so that'll be interesting. But I think what's important is some testing, is what I heard, and Karen did mention that, so that can help them refine the bids. The in-person testing would help. So that I didn't quite realize when we were talking about equipment to be purchased, that some more testing could be helpful with making that final decision.
It's not unusual with a bid to do demonstrations. So to the extent that that's in the offer, I don't know if it means off-site, because they may not want to bring the equipment in unless it's easily transportable.
Yeah, I'll have to check on that, because when I was talking about testing, that was for interim options. So testing setting up the room. We are getting a new camera for the McHugh conference room. So that conference room you could potentially use if you wanted to do a public meeting where the public was not invited in person but participated virtually. That's another option. So we may be also testing some of the other options for the interim. But I do think it's a good idea for us to look at what kind of information we can get back from the bidders on the equipment and what the needs are.
Other questions for Karen? Commissioner Hill, you're also. So I guess my question, Karen, you and I've had a little bit of conversations about this. Can the commissioners participate somehow? Because it is our meetings and ones that we have to manage.
Yeah, and that I think is my preference, because the commissioners are the ones that are actually doing the meeting, and it really has to work for you. So we can do, mindful of the open meeting law, but I'm happy to give out to all the commissioners the bid information and get any feedback on the bid information. I think the most important
we could make it a public thing. We could just.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
We could, if we could just sit in there and we could notice it as public, and if the public wants to watch us test. Yeah, I think that's what we did last time. I don't know.
Right. So
Crystal, I don't know if you remember, is that what we did last time?
Yeah, you had set up just a notice that it was public, but that it was for testing purposes, so we didn't have anyone join.
Yeah, thank you.
So there'll be we have the written responses, like what the equipment is. What's tricky is that we do, Unfortunately, we've been fortunate enough to have Austin. We do have another digital coordinator in that settled, and I'll let Austin share his good news at a later time, and we'll deal with that. But we do need sort of the staff that's going to run this to be engaged in the process and have the folks that have the expertise on the equipment. So, for example, if we get a bid and it's talking about like this certain camera, I wouldn't be able to advise you on, is that a good camera, or what, how strong is this company? Are they likely to be in business 2 years from now when we might need some maintenance, things like that? So we'll have to get some subject matter expertise for you as the commissioners in briefing you. We can do silent briefings on, our evaluations of the bids, or we can, do 2x2s and go through the pluses and minuses for each bid before, you may have a public meeting discussion on that. But I 100% agree with Kathy, is that we really want this to be what you want and how you want your meetings to feel and how this is going to be run, because it is the core function of the commission is to these public meetings. So we want to make sure that it's what you want. Commissioner Hill?
So I would just make sure, and I know you've already spoke to this as well as the other commissioners, we really do need to test whatever we think we're going to be purchasing.
Okay.
Last week, as you know, we did a little testing with the OWL.
Yes.
Down in the conference room, and although it was workable, I would not have said it was ideal.
Right.
And I want to make sure that whatever we do moving forward is going to be ideal for all the commissioners, because it's important that we do have that access. But proving me wrong kind of last week was because we were able to test it.
Right.
And I would hate to go and purchase all this equipment and then it not be what we thought it was going to be. So that's my red flag for this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see us back. I love in-person stuff. That's just the way I am. But again, after what we saw last week, I just don't know if it was going to be, with the current equipment, was going to be as good as I had hoped. And I think that the commission would hope that it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, especially given the, the sizable investment. We really want to make sure that's what you want. Absolutely.
So we'll stay tuned, but the idea is that the commissioners will be involved in,
yep.
I guess not formally part of a PMT procurement management team, but somehow our input will be part of the overall evaluation.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be really helpful.
Okay.
So the couple of the other issues just to flag for you, we do we probably want to let staff know of the current dress code, where we have let people dress a little more casually in jeans while the office is open in the hybrid model and not open to the public. Do you want to continue that? I will say that I've gotten very positive response from the staff on that policy that we have in place now. So I expect my recommendation would be to continue it, but it's one of these things that's part of the culture of the agency, and what do you want to see happen. The other issue that came up is the daily screening survey that we're having people fill out. I think that my recollection, Gail, from my conversation with Loretta after your reopening meeting, was that while helpful, the compliance is difficult to manage, and it may have outlived its usefulness. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. People are trying, but people will come to work and like, oh, I forgot to do it, or so it's it may be a little outdated at this point. So I don't know, Gail, if you have any comments from the meeting,
I do. Thank you. I think the most interesting thing I heard about that was from HR, who advised that they actually think it's outlived its usefulness, and at this point wasn't all that helpful. Okay. So that was persuasive to me that maybe it's not necessary, that briefing from HR.
So that may be something we can address at the meeting on the 16th, or theoretically, I guess we could decide not to do any more now. I'll defer to the commission on how you would like to handle that process-wise.
Did we approve that to begin with, Karen?
That's what I'm trying to remember. It's a good point. That may have been sort of an executive director initiative. So if the commission generally is comfortable with not doing any more, I may be able to just say that's no longer required.
Yeah, my recollection is that the working group discussed it, thought it was a good idea to implement with the, coming back to work. That was talked about at a commission meeting, but I don't believe there was any formal vote on that.
Okay. All right. So I may just go ahead with that then if there's no objection. Okay. I think just I'd appreciate any feedback from you as the commission on what would be helpful for you for teeing up the meeting on the 16th on the, the ongoing policy for the office on hybrid working and remote working. So my expectation is that I would put the current policy that we have in the packet. I can send it to you in advance. Probably even could send that today, so you have a chance to review it before the meeting on the 16th, and just make notes of any questions or any particular issues you think would be helpful to discuss. But I just wanted to ask the commission if there's anything I can do to help with that agenda item. Staff together for you, anything like that, let me know, and I can do that for you.
I think from my perspective, I see the working group, return to work working group, in the very same way that I saw the COVID working group. I mean, Commissioner O'Brien, you and I were on that, and we made regular, updates through you, Karen and Loretta, to the commission, and some either recommendations or direct asks. So maybe next week, if you've already, I guess you had a meeting yesterday. I don't know if you would have another meeting if it's necessary, but to come and, you've had the folks at the table thinking about this, if you could come and explain your thoughts, if there's recommendations, and then I guess where the commission either needs to establish at least some kind of a consensus or actually take formal action, right?
Right.
Commissioner Cameron, I see you nodding your head, but how do you want to give input on this?
Well, I know it's been really beneficial to be part of the working group because you get to ask questions. Have you thought of this? What about that? And it really was a very productive dialogue about, from directors of what's happening with their teams. So I don't know if that would be helpful to the two commissioners who are not on the working group to maybe have a 2x2 to have that same information before the discussion on the 16th. Or if you're more comfortable just waiting for the 16th and having a briefing from the executive director about the work of the working group. Either way, I think would work.
I'm comfortable with the latter. Then we don't worry about any kind of, sort of serial discussions or whatever. And the whole group will hear, all the team will hear the questions too, and hear and buy in. I think the work has been going on, and we've heard quite a bit of the policies, but the actual pilot ends
the end of December.
Yeah.
End of December. So I think, maybe if there's a recommendation going forward, or at least some, of the thoughts or the pros and cons. I always sort of say, the pluses and the minuses for what we want to do in the future.
Right.
As a response, the working group did have recommendations as of yesterday's meeting to bring forth to the commission, but certainly it's always up to the commission to make those decisions.
Right. So that seems to make sense. I basically would convene the working group, but instead of Commissioners Cameron and O'Brien, I'd have Commissioners Hill and Judge Stein at the meeting. I can do that.
No, I don't.
You want it?
So Brad, a 2x2 is always possible, but I don't know if it takes the place of a rigorous public discussion among the four of us, because then.
Okay, so just leave it on for the 16th. Don't have a sort of a pre-meeting with Commissioners Hill and the chair. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Brad, Brad's comfortable with it? Yeah. Yeah. And then the four of us can talk among ourselves. It's a public discussion, but no different than what we would do.
Okay. So aside from circulating the policy that's currently in place, the pilot policy, any other information that any of the commissioners would need from me? Okay.
I know that you're, yeah, just in terms of public health issues, of course.
Yeah.
It's not as though we have this pandemic behind us, so anything that's relevant to that going forward on practices, right?
Yep, exactly. Okay, so, all right, so that's where we are.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's where we are on that. Let me know if you need anything else, but otherwise, you know, people seem well, and you know, I'm excited to see the new camera for the McHugh conference room because that's a different kind of camera. So all right, I'm all set.
All right, well, thank you. Any other questions for Karen? Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Hill, you're all set? All right, well, Karen, thank you. Of course, my computer just went dark right now. I do know what our next item is, and I'm very excited about it. So first, I want to greet Ben Hires. Good morning, Ben. So nice to see you. We're very excited for our single item. That I don't think that's ever happened since I've joined the board, but maybe my memory's off. Very excited to have your presentation today, and I'll have Director van der Linden do a proper introduction. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I think you're right, Chair Judstein. I don't remember this, but it's a fitting issue to make sure that we give it enough space and time so that we can really dive into it. Actually, this morning, I'm going to turn it over to Marie-Claire to kind of kick this item off and introduce our presenters. But likewise, I welcome and hello to our presenters today. And I too am looking forward to the presentation and discussion. Marie-Claire?
Great. Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Today's presentation is entitled Living Here, Feeling So Isolated and Far From Home, Unpacking the Root Causes of Problem Gambling in the Asian Community. This study is part of our Community Engaged research project, and this category of research is intended to advance knowledge regarding casino impacts on population subgroups that are not reached by the general population surveys. The focus of this work is on communities considered to be at greater risk of experiencing gambling-related harm. Since this is a report for the community by the community, the Asian Cares team had an in-person launch event of the report to the community back in October. Chair Jadstein and Commissioner Hill were able to attend. And so this particular study unpacks some of the root causes of problem gambling in the Asian communities. And the research was motivated to fill in the gap of understanding how problem gambling manifests in the Asian community, and also to understand whether existing programs, services, and interventions are adequately serving this community. So the findings of this research are important to inform prevention and early intervention efforts to support the Asian community and to avoid gambling harm at the personal, family, and community level. In the meeting package, you'll find the full report and the research snapshot summarizing the report. And we have with us today to present on this study, Ben Hires, Executive Director of Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, Yo-Yo Yao, who's the Chief Program Officer at Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, and who's also part of the GPAC, Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, Addiction Subcommittee, and Dr. Hang Liang Rubin, who's Asian Care's Principal Investigator and Community Engagement Consultant. And I believe we may have some additional presenters as well that I might let Ben introduce. But over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Marie-Claire. Good morning, everyone. Happy Hanukkah and happy December, everyone. It's incredible that we are staring at 2022 and hoping that it will be a better year for all. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Marie-Claire. Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. And as Marie-Claire mentioned, we did have a really successful community launch of the report at First Parish Malden on October 27th. And I want to thank Chair Judge Stein and Commissioner Hill, Mark and Marie Claire for joining us. We had almost 50 people attend. It was, I think, the day after the big nor'easter that a lot of people lost electricity. So it was amazing that elected officials, community members, people representing public health and hospitals and researchers and others who care about this topic came out in person for this. So we are pleased to be able to share this. So again, my name is Ben Hires, and I have the privilege of being the leader of BCNC, or Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. Today, I also have the privilege of representing Asian Cares, which stands for the Center for Addressing Research, Education, and Services. And we're proud to have been able to do this report thanks to the Mass Gaming Commission. Now, Asian Cares is a coalition of ethnic community-based organizations, including BCNC, Asian Task Force Against Domestic Violence, the Vietnamese American Initiative for Development, and the Cambodian Mutual Assistance Association of Greater Lowell. I also want to thank our lead research team of Dr. Heng Leong Rubin, research manager Mia Colby, and Tufts School of Medicine researcher Dr. Susan Koch Weiser. And our research builds off of and expands the work that Dr. Carolyn Wong and Giles Lee, my predecessor, did in 2018 and 19 in a report titled Talking About Casino Gambling, Community Voices from Boston Chinatown, which the Commission also supported. Asian Cares is also grateful to Tufts Clinical and Translational Science Institute and the Tufts School of Medicine for supporting our work, as well as the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, Office of Problem Gambling, who together with the Commission, you all have made a commitment to listen and serve and provide resources to the Asian community and all communities at risk. I also want to recognize and thank our community research field workers and community members who work and live with the issue of problem gambling every single day. And in a minute, you'll have a chance to hear from Gina Kim, who is an ATASK field worker who will get a chance to share her experience working with and interviewing families as part of this research who've been impacted by gambling. And the need for this research really came from the stories that we heard from our community members over many, many years. It came from daughters and sons and wives and partners. And it also came from staff like Gina, who every day are on the front lines meeting the needs of our community, the educational needs, the employment needs, the mental health, and the linguistic and cultural needs of our families. And the report really looked at how these are the root causes that create the conditions for gambling to become an issue that leads to things like domestic violence, financial ruin, and families being torn apart. So I think, also underlying this report is the idea that many times people who are struggling the most are least heard and thought about in solutions, that they're never really asked what they need in order to get help. Because they may be deemed to be too hard to reach and they're overlooked. But our community research believes that the people who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And so to quote George I, who's a human-centered design thinker, today we want to honor the people's reality, create pathways for ownership, and build collective power. And when I say collective power, it was all the people who joined us in Malden and also all of you today in this virtual space. And I think, one of the most challenging things about this work and in life in general sometimes is empathy and understanding. And so I think if there's one thing that you're able to take away from this report and our presentation, it's an insight into how gambling intersects in unique ways with immigrant and working class Asians. Which I assume are shoes that many of us have not walked in or walk in before. So thanks again to the Commission for the support and the opportunity to share this research today. And now I would like to introduce Gina Kim to tell a little bit about her experience. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gina Kim. I'm a Korean Language Access Program Navigator at ATASK, where I serve Asian domestic violence survivors, especially providing lingual and cultural support. I was one of the community field workers who interviewed participants for the Asian Cares Project. One story I heard during the interviews was about how gambling caused devastation in a family. He and his wife started a family business together, but the wife had to manage the business all by herself because he didn't work and took money whenever he had a chance. This business was the only income that supported the family. When he wasn't taking money from the business, he was asking friends and family for money or selling their valuables. She tried to hide the money from her husband, but it caused other consequences. If she would not give him money to gamble, he would emotionally and verbally abuse the family. He often took his anger out on his children, physically abusing them under the name of discipline. The children preferred when their father was away from home, and as they got older, encouraged their mother to leave him. His abuse didn't stop until they were adults and their family divorced. At the casino, he was treated like a king. He would give him free hotel rooms and free food. In the beginning, she would go with him, enjoying the experience, until she realized he had a serious problem. Even when he stayed at home, he sometimes got a call from the casino, inviting him back, offering special treatment, and making him feel important. Eventually, his gambling led to the financial ruin of the family. Later, when attempting to sell the house, the wife found out that he had used the house as a collateral for his gambling. She was stuck with the debt and had to pay it off with help from her relatives. She felt ashamed and helpless. She wanted the therapy, but there was none in her language. She wanted help, but also didn't know who she could trust with the issue that was so sensitive and private in her culture.
Thank you, Gina. So I think, one of the things you may have heard in the story, and in a minute, Dr. Heng Rubin will explicate a little bit more through the research, is that the issue of problem gambling, certainly with many of the people that we see, is a family issue. It's not just an individual challenge. And towards the end, Gina talked a little bit about the difficulty that Asian community members have in terms of finding support and resources, especially linguistic access to resources, and in terms of Asian culture, how they think about some of these challenges and whether or not they go out and get help. So thank you, Gina, for all the work that you're doing. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Heng Rubin, who has worked a lot with BCNC and all of our community field workers. Dr. Rubin.
Hi, sorry, I had to unmute myself. So good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Heng Rubin, and Asian Cares really appreciates having this opportunity to come and present on this research that is really important to the community, and we're really looking forward to having a robust discussion afterwards. So as Ben said, we really believe that the narratives that our field workers collected, help people maybe not from the community, as he said, really walk in the shoes of those who live with and struggle, with this problem. The story you heard from Gina is really reflected across the 40 interviews collected by our 18 bilingual, bicultural community research field workers who met with Cambodian, Chinese, Korean, and Vietnamese people across the Boston region, primarily representing Lowell, Dorchester, and Chinatown. 93% of our interviewees were immigrants, 50% had a high school diploma or less, 66 identified as having a medium English proficiency or less, and 52% worked in the service industry. This is a population that often does not get captured in large survey research. All interviewees had stories that drew from direct experiences of family members, friends, coworkers, and neighbors who gamble. Like Gina, our field workers listen to stories of hardship, pain, and suffering that play out as child neglect, spousal abuse, elder isolation, strained family relations, depression, financial stress and ruin, and even death in our communities. When our Asian Cares directors first listened to our preliminary findings, it prompted one of them to say, "Problem gambling is the canary in the coal mine. Problem gambling sheds light on many of the systemic issues that the Asian community has been struggling against for decades." How do some of our immigrant workers get stuck in a cycle of poverty, low-wage work, and gambling? If you talk to the Department of Public Health, they will always tell us, we know from research that, poverty is one of the root causes of gambling. So some of what we heard from our participants is that, working is hard, gambling is a shortcut, one person shared. More than only using gambling as a way to supplement wages, interviewers observed that some turn to gambling as a way to earn quick money and have relief from their current job so they can, quote, have freedom and money. Too often, though, this is a false hope that can lead to devastating financial ruin, just as we heard from Gina's story. Another Chinese interviewee observed, when you gamble, everything will be gone. Clothes, house, and then relationships and trust. Couples under financial distress from gambling find the very fabric of their family lives being unraveled. Many in the Chinese community are particularly concerned about our restaurant workers. One Chinese interviewee said, "Some people working in restaurants have a very hard life here. They work 12 hours usually, come back home very late at night, such as at 11 p.m., and then they want to relax." This is year after year, day after day. So I want you to just really listen to that quote and let that sit with you, year after year, day after day. 40% of our interviewees mentioned the word boredom as a potential reason for why people turn to gambling. But what does boredom mean for our immigrant communities? Like pieces of a puzzle, these interviews revealed that boredom represents deep pain that some immigrants feel. One person said, "Boredom is part of the life cycle of being an immigrant." And another connected boredom to the challenge of, quote, integrating into American culture. Relegated to jobs in which they don't find meaning, some turn to gambling as a way to relieve stress. One Cambodian interviewee noted, "People here work so hard and there's no place to have fun. They can only go to the casino." Think about this, think about where you might go to relieve stress. For our immigrant communities, one observed, it's not easy to go to a bar and have a drink and find ways to entertain. Another Chinese interviewee said, they are alone, lonely, and unable to integrate into American society. This loneliness, cultural and social isolation can be particularly hard for our elders, who have lost traditional kinship networks, and their working adult children struggle to find ways to help their parents feel a sense of pride, self-worth, and belonging. Difficult jobs, no places to have fun, no outlets for stress relief may lead some to suffer from chronic stress and depression. The cycle of gambling, in which one is continually losing and becoming more and more in debt, can lead to depression, stress, and even desperation. One Cambodian interviewee shed light on this saying, "Depression, when people are poor, they tend to have no way of getting out of it. They try to find the easiest way, which is gambling." Others in the Cambodian community believed gambling helped people to, quote, escape reality, which a few felt was a way of coping with the genocide they fled in Cambodia. The cumulative stress that these stories narrate about poverty, financial distress, cultural and social isolation, loneliness, can be so overwhelming that it leads people down the road to domestic violence, just as you heard in Gina's story. Over half of our interviewees saw domestic violence in families in which there was a spouse who gambled. What draws some to the casino? Building on Dr. Wong's work, we learned that many go to casinos to gamble because it is easy to access, particularly because of the casino buses. Once at the casino, one doesn't need to speak English and they can just start gambling with just a few dollars. One Cambodian interviewee said, "The bus ferries you to a place where you are treated like a king. You don't have to think about real-world problems." As part of our work, we did a scan to understand the existing problem gambling treatment and services in Massachusetts, which were specifically targeted towards the Asian community. The scan indicated that There are services available for problem gambling. However, these services are primarily offered in English or offered through translators or part of a system that requires navigation in English. Many of our interviews revealed a lack of knowledge of or an ambivalence about existing services. What do these tapestry of interviews tell us about gambling in the Asian community? No one starts gambling with the intention of becoming an addict, hurting their families, or wanting to destabilize community life. People may start down the road towards problem gambling as a form of escapism, to supplement wages, as a way to relieve the stress, loneliness, and social and cultural isolation of being an immigrant, or they get lured to the casinos. Many of our immigrants work in jobs where they may not earn enough or where they don't find a sense of pride, dignity, and meaning. Many don't find what we are calling spaces of belonging in this country. I found it very tragic that one person observed of a gambler. They came to the United States for more than 20 years. Although they have children, a family, and a house, they still have no sense of belonging. One Chinese interviewee said, "Gambling is a shadow on the child." If you think about it, gambling has been casting a shadow on our communities. When Gina talked about the shame that many in our communities experience where there's gambling addiction in our families, it leads me to wonder where this is a learned shame that we as a community have internalized because we as a society do not talk enough about the systemic issues that have created this problem or made a concerted approach to address the root causes. Something that the Asian community fights against on so many different issues, problem gambling, behavioral health, is often, people use the culture argument and want to put it, they just, want to blame our community. And I think what our report does, as we've said, really tries to shed light on the systemic root causes of the problem. So we believe that this report sheds light on this really intractable issue. At the same time, it also reveals where there is light coming in. We see the light, that hope, with our community-based organizations. We all know what a critical, central, and compassionate role these organizations play as a safety net, as cultural brokers, as a bridge, as the first responders when any crisis, the pandemic, anti-Asian violence, hits our communities. These organizations are the building blocks for strong and resilient communities, and they help our immigrant communities navigate fragmented, broken, and confusing systems. One Asian Cares director once asked me, "Why are we not seen and compensated as experts because of the linguistic and cultural expertise that we bring to the table?" The value of this linguistic and cultural expertise our community agencies bring was reinforced by one Chinese interviewee who said they wanted services in an Asian organization that could, quote, communicate with the people in our community. Another said, it needs to be in a place with a Chinese atmosphere. And a Korean interviewee noted the importance of cultural connection in these spaces. These organizations and the people that work there bring valuable lived experiences to their work. These agencies, like BCNC ATASK, CMMA, VietAid, they've been trying to address problem gambling and the consequences of it on family and community life with no funding to do so. I believe this inequity, this unpaid labor needs to end. To honor these stories, I invite all of us here to think about what we can do so that the data in this report is actionable knowledge that can lead to meaningful change in our communities. The Vietnamese field worker told me a story that when she tried to recruit someone into the study, the community member expressed what I actually think is a fair and healthy skepticism about academic research. This person said, "Why should I participate? How will my story make a difference?" Let's not disappoint her and the many others who participated in this research so that they know that their stories, their pain, their experience can make a difference. We want all our immigrant communities to grow, thrive, and flourish. Now, I want to introduce my colleague Yo-Yo Yao, Chief Program Officer at Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, who will share the key recommendation that the Asian Cares Coalition is advocating for that comes out of our collaborative work that focuses primarily on intervention and prevention. As you listen to these recommendations, I want to really urge you to consider investing and investigating upstream prevention and not just mitigating once gambling has become a problem. Thank you. Yo-Yo?
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. My name is Yo-Yo Yao. I work at Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center, and myself also a licensed mental health counselor. And in last 11 years, I've seen so many families impacted by gambling. Probably those problems is before my arrival, and I hope today is the day we could re-examine our systems and bring some hope to the community. So as we heard all the findings, problem gambling is a symptom of underlying structures, poverty, social and cultural isolations. To tackle the cause of the problems, we definitely need to look into the culturally linguistic appropriate service are the key elements to respond to immigration stress and behavioral health issues. As Ben Hai said, we need to look into the systems, create the partnership and create the ownership together. And now I'm going to walk you through the 6 key findings in the 6 key recommendations in this report. The first one is fund invest in ethnic community-based organizations to develop culturally linguistic appropriate services for gambling preventions and interventions. The role of community-based organizations that lead by bilingual, bicultural staff, their interventions address problem gambling is very naturally integrated into workaround services delivery. The implementations of the services is caring, flexible, equitable, and the goal of these interventions is restore the immigration's sense of belongings, dignity that is often lost through the process of migrations. Number 2, recommend develop new innovative reimbursement model for community-based organizations doing gambling preventions and interventions go beyond the traditional clinical model. These innovative services should take place in community settings such as church, recreational center, schools, with service delivered by the culturally linguistic cultural broker. Use a family system approach that is tailored to account for ethnic and social services, the elements among the Asian community in Massachusetts. Number 3, invest in a space of belongings. Coping with the challenge of migrations, immigrants may usually gamble as an outlet for psychosocial stressor. For immigrants employed in the restaurant or small business, there's a little time for recreations after work and in a very physical, low-paid job. By investing in the neighborhood where immigrants work, live, play, immigrants can find a safe, recreational, and social opportunity. This will create a space of belongings for immigrant community. Number 4, extend the definitions and use mitigations fund to develop creatively workforce development program geared to immigrants. As the data show, the immigrants' primary service industry worker often find themselves in a very stressful, low-wage job that offer very little hope for their career advancement. Economic disadvantage and cultural differences lead to social isolations, hidden distress, loneliness, depressions, alienations. One of the interviews say that they find their job has no hope, very boring, very painful, and instead gambling gives people a false sense of accomplishment. So it's very important to expand the use of mitigations fund to create workforce development opportunity toward immigrant community. Number 5, conduct an equity audit for casino focused on responsive gambling and advertisement toward the Asian community. Casino provide culturally appropriate entertainment services, include a family-friendly resource, a welcome environment for elders. The casino make it easier for reducing the language and cultural barrier and provide transportations. One of the interviewees she is wondering whether the casino are strategically in being available when restaurant workers get off their work in very middle of the night and when people finish eating dinner in the Chinatown and take a free shuttle, go to the casino. There is a sense that the casino create an environment that look people to them, take advantage of a very vulnerable working class community. Number 6, develop a steering committee of a key community leader to guide the development of policy, practice, service around addressing the root cause of problem gambling. For example, partner with Asian Pacific Islander Civic Actions Network, API CANS, to address the root cause of problem gambling. The systematic nature of the issues indicate the social isolations, loneliness, dislocations, the results of the immigrations. The immigrant community, many of find themselves face racism, discriminations at the individuals and institutions level, struggle to find and maintain a fulfillment employment, support their family, feel a sense of pride and purpose and meaning and respect. Through the coalitions buildings partnership with API CANS invest resources in the community-based organizations, will provide workforce development opportunity, healthy family functions, behavioral health, and child support. Now, I would like to conclude that no one start gambling with intentions become an addict or hurting their family. The story we heard and show the systematic issues, the root cause of the problem can destroy the family and community life. Whether they gamble to increase the rage or to release stress, some fall into the trap of problem gambling addictions, while some may argue that casinos are offer employment opportunity, culturally activity for this community. However, the harmful impact of gambling found within this report make one questions whether the casino take advantage of the vulnerable community with very few alternative options. Massachusetts has the opportunity to become a leader in developing innovative solutions to address problem gambling by investing in community-based organizations, value their life experience. Immigrant community deserve a system that is responsive to their need and provide linguistic, culturally appropriate services that enable individuals to live and thrive. Today is the day to re-examine the intersectional barrier and complexity of the broken system, which we create ownership, build power to make systematic change in Massachusetts. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yo-Yo. I'll just say a few words to wrap up, and then I will ask Director Van der Linden to sort of wrap us up and give some of his thoughts, and grateful to him and his team for, again, allowing us to be able to do this work. I think, you know, that's a lot, right, to sort of take in and listen in, you know, the last 20 minutes. And again, as I said in my earlier comments, you know, what I hope, or, you know, what I don't want to happen, right, is that, you know, and I think Director Van der Linden agrees, right? We don't want this just to sit on a shelf and get dusty, right? And we want this to be an action-oriented report. And for me, a lot of times I think about, well, how are we moved to action? We're typically moved to action when things directly affect us, or we, you know, our heart is moved and opened up to, you know, the issue at hand. And again, many of us probably can't directly relate to a lot of this research and these experiences, but I think, you know, it's actually not just about the Asian community. I think, you know, a lot of the structural, you know, findings, the root causes are things that I think we're all probably concerned about as, you know, people who live in Massachusetts, as Americans. These are issues that, you know, maybe are not going to affect our bottom line or our families, but they, in the essence, they do affect the communities that we live in and the people that are part of our neighborhoods. And I think just for that is very good reason to think very creatively, as some of our recommendations are, to think differently. Because as we know, these root cause challenges, they're not going to be solved overnight, and they're not just going to be solved sort of in sort of separate pockets. These need to work together. So I think, you know, the workforce, the access to public health resources and such kind of gets to these larger issues that, you know, hopefully won't ever affect any of our direct families, but do affect a lot of the members of our community. So I think, you know, taking what you heard and then taking it to that sort of wider context, to me, is hopefully a way to kind of imprint upon your hearts and minds the needs that are out there. So again, very appreciative to this, and the last thing in terms of the action orientation, grateful to the Commission as well as the Department of Public Health for supporting ongoing work that we are going to base off of this research. So Mark, thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I didn't really prepare too much, but Ben asked if I would say a few words, and I have a lot to say about this. But first, thank you so much, Heng, Yo-Yo, Gina, Mia, thank you for coordinating and making sure this all comes off. So this is a really bold report, and one that we don't really, in our research agenda, we cover a lot of different topics. For a report to come across, a proposal and a report to come to us that really attempts to address and examine root causes is a bold effort. Problem gambling is incredibly complex, and as I think you see from this report and hopefully some other reports that have come our way, it's not an individual problem. This is problem gambling is a systemic problem, it's a community problem. And to identify easy solutions would be great, but these are complex. And I think Yo-Yo, now I've seen this a few times, you do a really wonderful job, and the report does a wonderful job of highlighting some of the ways we can begin to chip away at some of this. And I will say root causes are, as I said, root causes are really complex. What your proposals are addressing those, but those really just chip away at it. And that's no criticism. It's just recognizing this issue. This was community engaged research, and as Marie Claire said, as she kicked it off, it's research that's really intended to be driven by the community and for the community. And so Ben and team, I hope this was really valuable, and you will find it to be useful as we begin to put some finer detail to this issue within the Asian communities in Massachusetts. And it'll also be useful as a way to advance sort of your recommendations as ways to get at the root causes, salute some of the solutions that are presented here. So thank you for that. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Judd Stein.
Yeah. First off, a big thank you to Ben and Yo-Yo and your leadership at BCNC. This is a very it was a creative request. I'm fully behind the community engaged research and hope that we can continue to make that a rigorous part of our overall research framework. Dr. Rubin, I had the pleasure of hearing you in Malden, and she pointed out, and I know it was directed at me, a reminder of what Mark just said, that this is very much a systemic issue. And that was my big takeaway, Dr. Rubin. And because we are regulators of gaming, we need to reflect on this, even if we can't necessarily come up with all the systemic corrections. We can use the tools that we were given to the legislature to help inform community leaders, lawmakers, people in positions to start to address these very clear systemic issues. I want to turn it over to my fellow commissioners, and I do have a follow-up question, but I just wanted to make very clear that Dr. Rubin and Ms. Kim, Gina, the impact of your presentation has stayed with me, and I know with Commissioner Hill. It's enormously powerful. So for that, we thank you.
You know,
Commissioner Hill, sorry.
let me just say really quickly, Kathy, this is Dr.
There you
Rubin.
are, Dr. Rubin. I'm sorry.
I'm wondering where the voice is coming from.
Yes.
I just wanted to really appreciate and thank you, for that comment. One is, for someone who's, who was engaged in, research on systemic racism for probably, I studied ethnic studies in 1995 in California, and, one of the hard things is that it takes a long time for knowledge to really change things. And so, and I think that we're, in this country, we're really in a huge moment of racial reckoning. And I think that, all of us have had to take looks, internally to wonder, where have all of us not pushed hard enough, or where have all of us not understood things about different communities. And so I really appreciate, and I will say, the cultural pieces, it is something we hear from a lot of people, and so I really appreciate you, receiving this comment that, like I said, the Asian community has been arguing about, for decades. And I think, as Mark said, systemic issues take a lot of time. But I do think that if we can be more intentional about starting to chip away at it, then, in 5 years, in 10 years, things can look different, for our community. I mean, just like the other day, I was saying, actually last night to a friend, I was saying, things, things can change, right? Things can change. And I think even like looking at my own son, things will be different for him, as an Asian American growing up. And I think, it is all of us wanting to make that change that can make this world different.
Thank you. And I'll turn to my fellow commissioners. Commissioner Hill, I see that you have unmuted. Would you like to, was that intentional?
That is intentional.
Okay, great.
This is probably going to be one of my longer comments that I've made since I've come on the commission. So I ask for your indulgence and as I make these comments. First of all, the report itself, it was fantastic. The fact that you could go right into the community and talk to people, and they were willing to talk to you and give you, what they truly believed. I know during the press conference, someone made a comment that they were concerned that whatever they were telling the interviewers that it would go nowhere. Well, I think I can assure you that it's going somewhere. It was a very well done report and gave us a lot of information. And in fact, I believe that it's now a roadmap for the Mass Gaming Commission to use moving forward in regards to problem gaming. When I was at the press conference and we actually heard from some other people, and we heard from a very young gentleman who was our first speaker, if I'm not mistaken, and he told us about his experiences with his father, and it was a very touching moment, what he told us. And he told us how he had to sit in a car for hours at a time while his father went in, and mother went into a casino, and the kids sat in their car for hours and hours while their parents went in and gambled. But more importantly, how abusive the dad was toward the children. And if it didn't pull at your heartstrings, then something was wrong, because it did to everybody that was in that room. And Gina, you reminded us of the family interview about the family owning the restaurant, and how the father, took those dollars and he abused his children because of his serious gaming addiction. And he used his house for collateral, and no one else in the family even knew that that was taking place. I mean, those are real stories that you folks heard and put into this report. And we heard loud and clear on that day, as we have today, what's been going on in regards, into the Asian community, but of course, outside of the community as well. And Dr. Rubin, when you mentioned in your comments that this is a whole family issue, boy, this report shows that through and through, that this is a family issue, not an individual issue for those who have the gaming problems. What I was also happy to see and hear at the press conference, and a little bit today, but not as much as we did at the press conference, was the involvement with DPH. I think DPH needs to be a partner in this, and they are, from what I could gather on that day and from what I read in the report. But what I would hope as a commission, and I guess I would look to my fellow commissioners and to the staff, is what can we do to advocate to the administration and to the legislature that they need to maybe put forward a bigger effort. Not that their effort that they're putting in is bad right now, but could it be better? I'm going to say yes, I think it could be better. It could be a little bit stronger, but it takes funding to do that. And as we've been reading over the last few days, there have been some ARPA funds that have been allocated to the state to the tune of almost $5 billion. And I would have to believe that during the COVID-19 pandemic, that gaming issues may have risen. And I would think that the funds should be used for something like this, because I think that's what the intent was when Congress passed these dollars, is what came out of the COVID-19 pandemic and how can we use these funds to help get us through the pandemic. I would argue today that those funds could be in part used for addressing, and excuse me as I'm, the recommendations that have been put forth. And I would like to know, and again, I'm the newbie on the board, do we as a commission, do we reach out to the Secretary of Health and Human Service, Sutters? Do we meet with the acting commissioner, who I believe is Commissioner Cook, at this time, to share these results from this very good report, and how we can interact with them? Because I believe in my hearts of hearts, that's where this needs to go and needs to be addressed, at least to begin with, so that we can move forward and help not just the individuals, but the families who are being affected by this particular issue. So again, it was a great report. I was thrilled with the people who, I will say it, had the guts to stand up at that press conference and tell us their stories. Because some of those were very heartwarming, but I would argue were very hard to tell. And they stood there and they told to 50 people, 50 strangers that particular day, and certainly shared their stories for this report. So great report, great job. I hope, and I really do hope, that as a commission we can work with our partners in the legislature and in the administration to see if we can start looking at the systemic issue of this particular gaming problem. So I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry I went on longer than I normally do. I'm usually the short one, I think. But today, this is very serious, and I hope that this doesn't end today. And, as a former selectman, we did a lot of studies that ended up on bookshelves for decades and decades. And I don't want to see that happen with this report, and I don't believe it will. But I think it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you, Madam Chair. And to my fellow commissioners, thank you for indulging me for the longer than usual comment section.
No indulging, we're thrilled. And just also want to point out that Ben did send in the Snapchat a very nice thank you to you, Commissioner Hill, for really what he refers to as action-oriented recommendations. And I know, Ben, that's exactly what you are seeking here. I think we all join his sentiment that this is not to be a shelved report. None of our research reports should ever be viewed as anything that should always lead to action. And I know that Mark's team, particularly with Marie Claire now on board, that's their mission. So in terms of next steps with respect to Commissioner Hill, and then I'll go to the other commissioners, the good news is that Director Van der Linden maintains a very strong communication channel with DPH and Victor Ortiz and Assistant Commissioner Lindsay Tucker, who of course reports to the Commissioner of Department of Public Health and Secretary Sutters. And I think this is exactly a report that highlights an opportunity for collaboration, Mark, that we've talked about with respect to the Public Health Trust Fund. So I think Commissioner Hill, stay tuned. I believe Mark will take your words to heart and think exactly about how we enhance that collaboration. And then I know that I feel, commissioners, that we turn to Commissioner Hill to help us on his expertise as a former elected official at the legislature to see how we best send this research, to our lawmakers and to key administration members to think about how to move this issue forward. With that, Commissioner Cameron or Commissioner O'Brien? Yes, Commissioner Cameron.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the entire team here today, meaning all those who presented and all those who, really were so passionate about this issue and their commitment to this issue. I feel like I'm much better educated along the lines of what the issues really are. I remember being somewhat, not surprised, but just when the Sigma report, advised us that the Asian community as a whole was not more likely to be involved with problem gaming or to develop. But what you're focusing on here is the immigrant community, meaning those who may not have the opportunity for their language skills might be limited, their education and employment opportunities are limited. That's the vulnerable population here. And, all of your recommendations, I look forward to our team coming back to us and telling us what we can do to support those recommendations. And I really appreciate the chair and Commissioner Hill for presenting a better understanding, because it really does move you. Personal stories like this, it takes you from making a policy decision to saying, okay, how can we elevate this issue? How can we really be helpful? So I just want to appreciate I want to express my appreciation for all the presenters for really making it more than a research report and really helping us understand the urgency and helping give us the opportunity, if we can, to help with some of the recommendations. So just thank you to everyone involved, and it really did help me understand the issues better and appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Brien.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the sentiments that have already been expressed. I appreciate the time and the candor that was included in the report and in the presentation today. And what struck me the most, somewhat keying off what Commissioner Cameron just said, is the insight that can be gained when you have people that culturally know a community and have the ability to effectively communicate and to understand some of the barriers to full disclosure. It reminds me of sort of training in domestic violence back when I was in the DA's office, where you could get people going in from one group that everything was fine, when in reality, if you knew the shame and you knew the language and the circumstances, you would get the accurate picture of it. And that's sort of the feel that I get from this report, is if you really know how to ask the questions in a manner that will get the trust and the honesty, you get a better picture of what's actually going on. And I think it's, as has been said, it's a multi-factored approach in terms of dealing with it. This is not something that has a one method to fix, and it's going to be multifaceted. And again, going back to my background, I wonder about, as you said, the dissemination of the report, not only to the legislature, but to other agencies that maybe get an understanding, like DA's offices. They have prevention. They need to get educated also about sort of the multi-layers to some of the criminal activity they may see on the other end. So in addition to what we've talked about in terms of public health agencies in the legislature and community outreach groups, I am wondering about what, if anything, we do in terms of our connection with the AG's office and the various DA's office, particularly when you're talking about Suffolk and Middlesex with the communities that you highlighted in your report, whether there's some way we can disseminate this or have conversations with them also. But I thank everyone for the time and coming here today to talk to us about it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. So if I could just add in a couple of more substantive thoughts. First off, I do want all of you to know that the Gaming Commission has affirmatively adopted an equity and inclusion policy and has adopted 5 action steps that we abide by or follow on a daily basis. Our executive director is tasked to implementing it. And I think we are becoming more naturally intentional about making sure that our policies and our procedures with respect to hiring, procurement, our regulatory process in terms of adopting and writing them and our own internal culture, we are being intentional to think about disproportionate negative effects on people of color. I don't minimize that work. We've seen already a lot of impact since we adopted it in June of 2020. So that's our internal work. And today, your work only makes me think about how we can do our work better, internal work better. Now again, I just lost my screen, so bear with me as I bring it back up. I am looking at recommendation number 5, Ben, and Yo-Yo. That's the one that on our screen says fund an equity audit about responsible gambling and responsible advertising in the Asian community that includes assessing whether they are engaged in any predatory practices. Can you elaborate on how you imagine that recommendation being implemented? If you have any, if you already have some research that really examines, at least in Massachusetts, advertising practices. Would be starting with ground zero, just where you think that, and I hear an equity audit. I guess I'd like to understand what you're imagining that to be.
Mark, I also don't know if you want to jump in as well. I mean, I think that like the stories, there's a lot of real life, not even gut, just real life experience with how that plays out within the Asian communities. I mean, we've already mentioned, everyone I think knows about the buses. You look at actually one particular casino's website and you look at their slot machines, and 3 out of the 5 games that they promote right on their website are targeting Asians. I mean, targeting maybe, debate that word, right? So I think, there's an imagination of really looking at how those practices, who are they actually targeting? How are they impacting those particular folks? How are then perhaps once folks get engaged, and there are other things actually not that are gambling based, the entertainment that is provided, the family-oriented entertainment perhaps that's provided. And, to go back to Commissioner Hill's recognition of Wayne Ye's story about the fact that he had to stay in a car. I mean, there are things that are drawing parents, there are things drawing families perhaps to these places that then get them sort of trapped into the issue of gambling. So Yo-Yo, I think you want to add some.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Yeah, so I do want to add some element on that. I tell you a very quick story. Before the Thanksgiving, I know, she said, on the Thanksgiving week, I'm going to casino. I say, why? She said, she's going to bring her family as well. She said, casino have very fabulous, they hire very famous Asian singer. You would not be able to attend a concert in Asia, but you will be able to attend concert in United States in the casino. So bought a ticket for $700 with her family, visit the casino, stay overnight. The casino hold the concert at 12 a.m., finish 2 a.m. in the night. So you definitely stay in the resort and get through all the entrance through the casino and attend the concert. When you finish, you have get through the casino and then attend the place in the hotel. So I think casino have a entire Asian team focus on marketing. So they are not get into just focus on casino, they get into entertainment, recreations. They not only target individuals, working family, but they also target elders as well too. So it's very comprehensive marketing strategy. And I think if we really want to look into these elements, two areas I think we need to look into is consult an attorney about marketing strategy, as well as hire someone could go into a casino to collect those data. Because as a community-based organization, we don't have those resources, but we hear from the ground all the time. Someone told me that the shuttle bus run more frequent than MBTA bus in the Chinatown. You could just hook up a shuttle bus, go to casino anytime you want. Those are my thoughts.
Chair Judge Stein, if I may add a piece to this.
Yes, please.
So yeah, I paid close attention to that recommendation as well, and because it's directly related to the work that I do, and it forces us to ask ourselves what are we doing and how can we do that better. So, in terms of an equity audit related to responsible gaming, we're near finishing writing a request for proposals for the Game Sense program, and an aspect of that is to examine how responsive or culturally responsive the Game Sense program is. That's a small piece of it. I recognize that because Game Sense has been a key piece to the Commission's responsible gaming efforts. But I think a question is that part enough? Is it that adaptable that it can be responsive to various communities? And so we hope to get some information from that. Ben, you mentioned specifically themes on some of the games, and I think that's an important issue that I think doesn't get a lot of attention, and looking at specific themes on the games and what types of stereotypes they perhaps intentionally or unintentionally perpetuate, and how that may be harmful. I know British Columbia Lottery Corporation has initiated some efforts in that area to do an audit of gaming within that jurisdiction, and it's something that I'd be interested to see how that goes and where that is relevant in Massachusetts. Advertising is something that we actually, following this report, began to pick up and take a look at what other jurisdictions are doing. Both within the United States and outside the United States, and we're in the process of preparing a document for the Commission to review what that looks like. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas has done some really interesting work in this space, and I think that I think that we can look at that. And Yo-Yo, I know we can't deliberate on this as part of the Addiction Services Subcommittee, but I would wonder what we could possibly do through that avenue on any of this. I think that there's some possibilities for us to grab a hold of something and really try to see it through. So this report already has made inroads and caused us to think differently or do a deeper dive in specific areas. So I appreciate that.
Ben?
Mark, may I ask a question? I think we have had a conversation, to go back to the buses, which is one very visible element to this, in a lot of fronts. my recollection is that was there supposed to be an audit of the buses in terms of how frequent, numbers of people picked up, locations, because again, if we think again at the next level, kind of structural, I know that there are some elected, certainly in Suffolk, who come from the community concerns about the pollution of buses idling, sitting there, taking up space in these communities, et cetera. There's a public health to pollution. I mean, especially into Boston, Chinatown, which is one of the highest polluted neighborhoods in Boston, for example. So if I'm misremembering, or can you speak to that audit?
That actually, I'm sorry, Ben, is one area that I haven't, since this report, tackled that, but I don't think we should let that fall off the radar either. So,
great.
To be honest, but, again, it's, I think it's something we need to look at.
Can I ask a point of clarification? When we're speaking about buses, it's my understanding that buses come from our Massachusetts licensee or licensees. But am I also right in understanding that they come from at least one neighboring state as well?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, I can answer that. So
Thank you, Mia.
yeah, so a lot of what we're seeing recently has been a lot from here, but historically and still there are buses coming from Connecticut as well. I think the higher frequency buses are here in Massachusetts just because they can make more trips. So
I guess that shows the need for an audit, really for us to understand the whole ecosystem.
Mia, can you share where the buses go right now, where they have pickups? What people talked about?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact locations. I know there are pickups in Chinatown. There are pickups, I believe, Malden Center. There are also pickups in Quincy, and most of these pickups, both for the buses from Massachusetts, but also buses from Connecticut, all primarily pick up outside of either Asian grocery stores or Asian eateries. So those are some others. I do know they do also pick up in other places, but the most frequent visits are the places that are highly concentrated Asian populations.
Working class immigrant.
Yeah.
Yes, I understand.
And I do know that some of the comments that came out of our interviews was people said there were restaurant workers and there was always the bus knew when the restaurants in Chinatown closed down. So they're always idling right out front of the restaurants, knowing when the restaurant workers leave to pick them up and take them right to the casino if they want to go. And now I know that was a big concern of a lot of community members.
Thank you, Mia. Any other questions or around the recommendations or anything that you want to? We know that Ben and team will always be available to answer questions we have. But with Dr. Rubin and her valuable time and her team's time, any further questions for them? I guess I'll say on behalf of the four of us, Dr. Rubin, Gina, Yo-Yo, Ben, Mia, I think I've got everyone. It was, again, a pleasure to meet you in person in Malden, and now to have this very, very thorough presentation today, and the luxury for us to think about one subject matter and such a significant one. So I think we digest this, and Mark, we roll up our sleeves a bit to just see, I'm a believer in tackling what we can tackle sooner than later. And then I think we're all hearing there's an opportunity for us to at least be reaching out to other significant community members and leaders in the community in the Commonwealth that will be interested in this report. And Ben, I also know you're doing that outreach yourself there in a great way. So thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Judstein, I'd just like to say, this is Dr. Rubin. First, I really want to, recognize all the commissioners who really, gave us your commitment. Well, first of all, who took these stories to heart, and really gave us your commitment that this wouldn't be a report that sat on your shelf. And that, and through partnership, right? Like we can access the stories from the communities. You guys can, access the legislators, that really through this, kind of community-based public-private partnership that, I think the community can really, make some inroads. So I really wanted to appreciate that. And I really also want to appreciate Mark and Marie Claire for stewarding this community engaged research arm, for the commission, for recognizing that, large epidemiological surveys are important, and they are not enough. And, really want to recognize and honor Mark and Marie Claire for, for having this, and also for really, believing in our research and really wanting to figure out how to move the needle on this. And then just the last thing is, I really want to again honor the 18 field workers, that went out and collected these stories. I can't remember which commissioner. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. You talked
Commissioner
about
O'Brien.
From your work in DV, recognizing that it is these folks that can get these stories. Like I didn't do a single interview. I didn't do a single interview. I mean, I met with these field workers every week. And, I just want to say, remember these field workers were doing this during the pandemic, after the shootings in Atlanta. And, their heart was really in it. And Mark was great. He, gave us some additional funding when we realized that, doing this kind of human labor intensive, research, took more funds than what we had originally, put in the grant. So, really want to appreciate the commission for recognizing and supporting this kind of research. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin, and I think those are great concluding remarks. We'll follow up, Mark, perhaps even at our next commission meeting on some initial observations and steps. I'll probably, again, look at our equity and inclusion, Karen, our commitment, and then the issue around cultural competency with respect to how we procure research. We should be thinking about that. We've learned a lot today for our own work, as I said, and now we also have the work that we regulate. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Ben, anything that you want to conclude with, or just look forward to seeing you again?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I hope everyone has a safe and healthy holiday with their families coming up.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And so I think because we have this very tidy agenda, the next item is any commissioner update. No. Okay. Any matter that I haven't thought of, Crystal? Something that I haven't thought of today that we need to address?
Not that I can think of.
I think she's got some Florida sunshine on her face. She needs to get out there. So, Crystal, thank you for staying with us, and I hope you enjoy your family. Commissioners, if there's nothing else, we have a need for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All set? Anything, Commissioner O'Brien, we're all set? All right. Roll call vote. Commissioner Cameron.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Aye.
Commissioner Hill.
Aye.
And I vote yes, 4-0, Todd. And Todd, I don't know what jeans you're wearing, but you look very professional in our office space today. I'm sorry that I'm not seeing you in person.
Thank you for noticing. I'm actually wearing real pants, so.
I figured. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.
Bye.